All right, guys. My name is Auguris, but people call me Og,
I'm Doxa.
and this is our podcast, Blood and Brotherhood. Name subject to change. Episode 1. Today we're going to be analyzing, I
Five
guess.
stars.
Yes.
Or episode 1, just Epic of Gilgamesh.
The Epic of Gilgamesh.
So, Clay Tablet Boy, pretty old story.
Oh yeah. Do you want to start it off with like a plot summary or something, or do you just want to get right into it?
I say start off with a summary of the story itself, because you definitely know some interesting facts about that.
Yeah, this is like low key one of my favorite, if not favorite, mythological stories. So I guess I'll just give it like a small plot synopsis.
Or not even plot, just like the history of the tablets.
Oh yeah, okay. So basically, what the Epic of Gilgamesh is a mythological epic story from the Mesopotamian civilization, specifically from around the city of Ur or Uruk. I can't remember exactly which one. And they come from a series of like 12 to 13 stone tablets that were dug up around this immeasurably ancient civilization. Like we're talking 4000-ish BC is when this story is dated from. It makes it like the oldest like actual story, actual epic poem or myth discovered so far. To put into some perspective, the Epic of Gilgamesh is further away from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, time of writing wise, than the Iliad and Odyssey is close to us.
Yeah, the Iliad and Odyssey are very old stories, too.
Yes, 800 BC, but we're talking, like 4000 BC with the Epic of Gilgamesh. And you can actually see traits of the Epic of Gilgamesh in multiple myths and stories around the area, which has led some scholars to believe that this was like usually an oral tradition type story that got passed around through trade and stuff, and may have found its way into thematically found its way into Homer's stories and a bunch of other myths.
Also, there's some crossover between the Old Testament and the Jewish writings and
Yes,
one of the characters.
the flood is prefigured here way before any of the Old Testament was put into writing. So that's just another interesting tidbit. To sum up, it's basically the oldest story we have on record, the oldest written story, and it tells the tale of an ancient Mesopotamian king named Gilgamesh. And his story of friendship with his brother Enkidu, Enkidu's eventual death, and Gilgamesh's subsequent journey to try and discover the secret of immortality, failing to keep actually immortality, and then learning to accept death. Kind of like a very, very like deep story. Like the currents of the story run underneath a lot of what other human tales are made up of, if that makes sense.
It's true. Well, I mean, just the Joseph Campbell hero with 1,000 faces kind of idea.
Yeah.
It's very
This-
archetypal.
Yes, that's the word for it I was looking for. And hold on a second. Yeah. So taking through the story real quick, it begins with Gilgamesh as like a king. He's 2/3 god, 1/3 man, which I'm not actually sure how it works.
Wait,
but-
okay. Let's actually think about this. So 2/3. How are you 2/3 of something?
I don't know. I always just kind of rolled with it because I
Yeah.
figured it's too confusing.
I'm really confused. So that means he must. Okay. So maybe out of like his 4 grandparents. Wait, that still doesn't work though. That's not.
It's always by twos, so it doesn't,
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
work.
that literally doesn't work. Well, I mean, he's 2/3 God, so I guess he makes it work, you know?
I don't know. He's 2/3 God. That's all we know. Specifically 2/3 too.
Yeah,
Not like a mistranslation of demigod. It's 2/3.
that's funny. So he's
But
mostly God, is what it's trying
yeah,
to say.
he's almost all God is the point. He has a little bit of human, but it still makes him that trait defines him as a human.
Yeah, it's interesting how even though he's 2/3 God, like they don't refer, like the gods don't really respect him as a god. You
No,
know?
he's not. He is not a god. Like for all intents and purposes, he's basically a super cool, super awesome human. And this comes into play later with the themes of the story. So Gilgamesh is a kind of being a jerk. He's being a tyrant over his city of Uruk that he's ruling over. He kind of just walks up to people, takes their wives, and
Kills their sons.
uses them.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, uses them and gives them back, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So the people of the city pray to the gods to defeat Gilgamesh. Gods respond by creating an equal to Gilgamesh in power, a wild man born in the forest and raised by animals called Enkidu. Enkidu is ignorant of his purpose, but eventually finds his way to Gilgamesh, and the two have a fist fight in the city walls. It lasts like an entire day, and Gilgamesh eventually wins, but as they were fighting, they recognized each other as equals and became best friends, closer than best friends, actually. Basically brothers.
Yeah, he calls him like a brother friend or something.
Yeah,
In the translation I was reading, at least. And also, you
yeah,
forgot to mention the temple harlot too.
yeah. I'm kind of just giving a brief description. We can get into that stuff later.
Oh, okay.
So eventually, like they go on a bunch of adventures. They slay a creature in the forest called Humbaba. The gods get mad because that was like the guardian of the forest, and they send down another monster called the Bull of Heaven. They slay that too. And as revenge, the gods strike Enkidu down with illness, and Enkidu dies. And Gilgamesh has never really had to deal with death before, and he suddenly is hyper aware of his own mortality. So he decides to go on an epic quest to try and discover immortality, so that he doesn't have to deal with this problem anymore.
Goes to
So he does
scorpion
his epic.
people, right?
Yeah, he goes west to try and find. Oh, I forget his name, but basically like a wizard from pre-flood days, antediluvian days, because supposedly he lives forever. And he does a bunch of trials, talks to a bunch of people, and eventually makes his way to this Noah figure who explains that he was only given immortality by graces of the gods, and it was a very specific thing that can't really be repeated. Gilgamesh is kind of crushed. He's like, dang it, I'll never be immortal now. But the Noah figure ends up feeling bad and tells him about another form of immortality in the form of a flower at the bottom of the ocean. And Gilgamesh is like, all right. And he leaves the island that he found the Noah figure on, goes, recovers the flower, and sets it down as he goes to rest. Unfortunately for him, a snake comes along and eats the flower. And the last chance at immortality slips through Gilgamesh's fingers, and humanity is cursed to die for the rest of time. Gilgamesh, after realizing that he can't escape death, comes to accept it and returns to the city of Uruk to lay everything down in immortal writing and serve as a just king and as a human king, having fully accepted his own humanity and his own mortality. The epic poem ends with Gilgamesh's funeral, and one of the last lines of the entire story is, "Behold, Gilgamesh, king of kings, who, even though two-thirds god and one-third man, could not escape the specter of death. For the mightiest cannot no, the mightiest cannot encompass the world, and the tallest cannot touch the skies."
Dang, that was a good summary, dude.
Thanks. But yeah, that's basically it. I went a little bit more in depth than I thought I could, but it's really important for the audience to understand that this is a very thorough tale of like what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Other stories have like more abstract meanings behind them, I feel. Like Odyssey is like about how man's morality wanders from place to place. The Iliad is about, rage and what it can do to people, among other things. But like the Epic of Gilgamesh is kind of like the human experience laid out in a single story, which is why I love it so much.
Yeah. There's a lot of themes of kind of civilization and the natural
Yeah.
world there too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially my favorite line from it is when Gilgamesh and Enkidu are in the city, and I forget who says it. It's one of them. They say, "I'm oppressed by luxury."
Yeah. It's Enkidu. Hold on. Let me find the quote. I think I wrote it down somewhere.
Yeah, because that's very relatable when you live in the ways we do now in the 21st century. Like even kings in the past did not have this kind of luxury. Like nobody had AC 100 years ago.
Idleness.
Nobody had planes they could fly on. Nobody had like food, like this much food ever before. And we're kind of
Yeah.
just drowning in it.
Yeah, like for me, it kind of underscores the idea that the problems that we're dealing with civilizationally about, human beings becoming weak, impotent, idle, kind of like flabby men without chests is as old as the story of civilization itself. Like this is coming from the first civilization, and people are already caught on.
Yeah,
Like
the
it really
original.
goes to
Yeah,
show
they
that
are the original civilization.
they are the original civilization, like the first one, unless discount Atlantis or whatever. I don't know.
Atlantis.
But yeah, they already know what's going on.
Especially with the temple harlot when Enkidu sleeps with her, he like loses part of his strength, right?
Oh yeah, there's a point in the story where Enkidu's like kind of made a name for himself protecting like wild animals from hunters and stuff. So a temple magistrate sends someone to tame this wild man and bring him into the fold of civilized society. And the way that they do that is by having one of the temple whores sleep with him, which I find is really funny.
Yeah, the fact they use a woman to tame him and bring him into civilization, I think, is very telling.
Yep. There's actually a quote where Enkidu can feel his like strength flowing away after he slept with this woman. He also loses the ability to speak to animals when he sleeps with this woman. So like the wilderness kind of drains out of him a little bit when he consorts with the feminine representation of civilization.
Yeah, that's
You know, there
that's a good way
there
to
are
put it.
costs there are costs to being tamed and being able to interact with your fellow human. You have to give something up.
You have to give up like that animal nature, kind of a higher
Mm-hmm.
consciousness level thing going on.
Yep.
Because I don't know, could Enkidu talk before he met
I don't think so.
the harlot?
Well, they mentioned that Enkidu actually had a wife and children before he slept with the temple harlot, but
Oh,
it's never implied that he could talk or is like a full human as most
so
people would
wait,
consider.
where's his wife and kids? Like
They
they're
never
just
show
never
up.
mentioned again.
Yeah, no. One of the things that you guys ought to know about the Epic of Gilgamesh is that we only have 12 tablets. There is a lot more background context that we straight up don't know about. And there's actually been theorized to be entire portions of the story just straight up missing.
Looks like we got a lot of
We
the
just found the
important
stuff that
plot
kind of
points though.
lines up.
We got some of the important plot points though, which is
Yeah,
really nice.
we got enough to make a coherent story, but it's probably not all there. We just know that he mentions that he had a wife and children and that he left them when he left the wilderness. But it's not implied that he could talk or do whatever. He could commune with the animals,
Yeah,
but
that's interesting.
higher function speech, probably not.
So we missed the beach episode and the slice of life Gilgamesh and Enkidu
God
portions.
damn it. Keep your weeaboo schlock out of my epic poems, bro.
I mean, there's probably some kind of like spin-off stories and stuff about both of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah,
which would be
we
interesting.
just know so little about this culture. We just have only the tablets to go off of. And even what I find it's really cool that with only like these 12 slabs of rock with like almost probably like 90% of the cultural context missing and probably some plot points missing too, we already have such an amazing story. I
Yeah.
wonder what it'd be like if we had the entire thing.
I mean, maybe some of the mystery would be lost though. Like maybe it's better, kind of this weird, mysterious tale with a lot of the plot points missing. Like maybe that adds to the
Yes,
story in some ways.
I guess. I'd be curious to see what it was.
Yeah, that's true. Or actually living in the culture at the time, so you understand a lot of the more of the meaning.
Yeah.
And that would definitely be
So
very interesting.
this had like a lot of parallels to like civilization versus nature that you wanted to get into. What were your thoughts on that? Because it kind of relates to Enkidu.
Yeah. I mean, thanks, Og. So with Enkidu, it's kind of like when he loses his ability to talk with the animals, it's the only way he can really talk to humans. And that's really interesting. Or the fact that they get like killed for slaying kind of beasts that represent nature's power is very telling about humans trying to like reach up to nature's power. You know what
To
I mean?
nature's. Sorry, I cut out for a little bit. Can you back up to where I asked you about uh, Enkidu and civilization?
So basically, Og, the whole Enkidu and civilization thing. It's Enkidu trying to, I don't know, like I guess Gilgamesh and Enkidu like fighting all these nature spirits. It's kind of like humans like industrializing stuff, I'd say,
Yeah,
and especially with cities, which are like the ultimate mark on the land, where you can't really get the land like back the way it was. Like there will always be some kind of something left of the city for people to find someday. You know,
like scars.
yeah, scars in the land and pollution and stuff. And it's funny how they're killed by the gods for
Yeah,
destroying nature, and so it's kind of like that's probably
they're
what's gonna
punished.
happen to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe not killed by the gods, but definitely Mother Earth or nature is can definitely bite back.
Ganon.
Yeah, you can see it
I
with
know I'm
global warming and
pronouncing it like
stuff.
an autiste, but it's better that way on like audio wise.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, but yeah. So Doc, what I was like more, what I picked up off of it is that a lot of the parallels between Enkidu and Gilgamesh, like representatives of their factions respectively, like Wild and Prin Man versus like
Chad, fascist.
like bad Apollonian civilizational builder guy, is that Gilgamesh wins. Like you got to keep in mind the people who wrote this story are the people who developed the ability to write in the first place. So they were the city dwellers.
They're definitely biased.
Yeah, they had a vested interest in representing civilizational life as better than Anprim life, but which is why they have Gilgamesh win, of course. But I think it's very telling that they specifically had to weaken Enkidu first because they explicitly created Enkidu as an equal. So they have to make up some kind of excuse to make sure that he loses. And the excuse that they use is that he slept with a temple harlot. He became civilized. He became civilized. So he was kind of poisoned by this urbanite energy, which is why he lost to Gilgamesh.
The
And
white
in the
suburbs took
reverse,
away his powers.
yeah, white suburbs took away his power. But in reverse, Enkidu kind of gives this wild energy to Gilgamesh that he had been missing his entire life. All he had desired for was an equal, was like a brother that he could truly be friends and connect with. And Enkidu gives him that. He gives him part of his own nature back to him. And that makes Gilgamesh stronger. So you have like a dynamic where Enkidu is consistently weak and Gilgamesh is consistently strengthened because Enkidu gives and then Gilgamesh kind of takes, but he also gives something poisonous.
That's true. But I think also when you were saying that they're biased towards Gilgamesh, I don't think it's really showing how good civilization is. I think the whole story is kind of just a complaint about civilized life when you really
Yeah.
look at it. Like he dies in the end. I don't think Gilgamesh really like wins in the end. He dies. He never does like fulfill his quest.
Yeah,
And
no, and like it's also kind of depressing because the Mesopotamians and Babylonians in particular had a very, very negative view of the afterlife. Some of them didn't even believe the afterlife existed, and out of the ones that did, thought it was like a really creepy, disgusting gray shadowland where human spirits would turn into like half bird, half human monstrosities and roam the realm of the dead forever, unless they were like summoned by like a magician or whatever. They had like a very negative, kind of like lunar slash night time view of the afterlife as opposed to like the Egyptian super awesome happy solar afterlife.
interesting. It kind of reminds me of the Greeks, where it's like, oh, everybody goes to Hades unless you're one of
Yeah,
those
exactly.
special people that gets to Elysium.
Yeah, you get stuck in the fields of asphodel, I think they're called.
Yeah.
Percy Jackson knowledge coming in.
Percy Jackson gang.
But yeah, like that just what that means for the story though is just that accepting death when you know that it's going to be a very, very, very shitty afterlife is so much more powerful because you know there's nothing to look forward to. You can't really be like, well, I'm going to die, but at least I'll spend an eternity in heaven or whatever. It's like, no, this is as good as it gets, but you're still able to accept it. You're
Yeah, that
able to
makes him more
accept
manly, I
that.
think.
Yeah,
That's
it
kind
makes
of
you very
reminds me of the
happy.
Stoics, where it's like not really agnostic on the afterlife, but they don't really look to the afterlife as a place of comfort. Like they look like when you're dead, pretty much. But like you
Yeah,
shouldn't be
exactly.
afraid.
Exactly.
And that
I
I
don't know.
think,
Yeah, that really impacted my view of it. Like the memento mori attitude of a lot of Christianity could do very well off of Stoic and Gilgamesh's attitudes towards death.
yeah, that's true. And I think an interesting thing is that the society is even dealing with fear of death in the first place. Just thinking about there was an interview with Ted Kaczynski, going back to influences again, and he said that when he was in the woods, like he was not, or right before he went off into the middle of nowhere and just lived in the woods, like he was not afraid of death. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, guess he couldn't stand civilization, and I think civilization in part makes people afraid of death.
Yeah, I think so too. It's very telling that Gilgamesh has to leave the city first.
Yeah, that's true. In order to make peace with himself and with the
In
afterlife.
order, yeah, in order to make peace with himself, he has to go into the wilderness. There are in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there are no answers in the city. There are none.
That is true.
That's where the quest begins and where it ends. But it's always like a state of stability or a state of peace. Like all the cool action, all the lessons, all the important points happen outside of civilized life.
I think that's just true in real life too. Like the parts you remember the most are not standing in line to get your driver's license. It's like interacting with like very interesting people in ways that mean more than your daily occurrence as a wage slave or as a
Yeah,
college student or something.
very true.
And so I think that about wraps it up, honestly.
You think so?
Yeah,
Got nothing more to say?
I personally have nothing more to say.
Oh man, I just wish I got to say more of these quotes because they're so good.
What are some other quotes that you want to share?
Just this is just me basically being a fanboy over the story. They don't really tie back too much into like any point that we have going on right now. But I just wanted to share some of these.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on a second, let me find it. Gilgamesh said, I have not established my name stamped on bricks as my destiny decreed. Therefore, I will go to the country where the cedar is felled. I will set up my name where the names of famous men are written, and where no man's name is written yet, I will raise a monument to the gods.
Dang,
Like,
that's a good
if
one.
there has never been a more powerful call to action than that. And I think that's the note I kind of want to leave off on. That if you have something that you want to do or something that you want to be, but you feel that like the outside world is constraining you, you just I don't know. You just have to go and do it, man.
You have to go where no men's names have been written before.
Like seek glory. Do something worthy of the life that you have. Don't just be like, well, I'm going to play my part as a cog in the machine. Like, no. Go to where the cedar is felled, set up your name where the name of famous men are written, and raise a monument to the gods.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to end. So this has been Og and Doxa, and we hope to see you guys in the next episode of the podcast.